What's that?
A subscription to a magazine.
Another magazine? Carol, this place is beginning to look like a dentist's office.
Well, I'm sorry, I just couldn't resist the salesman.
Man, if you grew up in the 70s, you know magazines were everything. Before the internet, before 24-hour news, before we could argue about everything on social media, we had Time, Rolling Stone, Playboy, National Lampoon, Mad Magazine, and a whole stack of others sitting on coffee tables and tucked under mattresses. Some of these covers weren't just eye-catching, they shook pop culture. Let's take a walk down memory lane and revisit the wildest, most unforgettable magazine covers of the 1970s. National Lampoon. If you don't buy this magazine, we'll kill this dog. January 1973. Then there was National Lampoon's infamous If You Don't Buy This Magazine, We'll Kill This Dog cover from 1973. If you were a teenager or college kid back then, National Lampoon was your Bible of bad taste. This cover showed a sad-eyed dog with a gun to its head. It was outrageous, darkly funny, and absolutely unforgettable. Everything that made the magazine what it was. You'd flip through the pages feeling like you were reading something you probably shouldn't. And that was the point. The cover itself became one of the most legendary magazine covers of all time, often cited as one of the greatest in publishing history. Cosmopolitan, The Bold Women's Revolution, April 1972. By the early 70s, Cosmopolitan had transformed from a traditional women's magazine into a bold, unapologetic voice of the sexual revolution. The March 1972 issue was a game-changer, featuring a confident, glamorous woman posing with fierce independence. No husband, no domestic backdrop, just sheer empowerment. This was the era when Cosmo started talking openly about women's sexuality, career ambitions, and independence. If you were a young woman in the 70s, Cosmo wasn't just a magazine, it was a manifesto. And that's what made covers like this so iconic. Rolling Stone, The Beatles reunion cover, July 15, 1976. Speaking of pop culture icons, let's talk Rolling Stone. In 1976, the magazine did something special. It featured all four Beatles on the cover for their July 15th issue. By this time, the Fab Four had long gone their separate ways, each pursuing their own solo careers. But seeing John, Paul, George, and Ringo together on a Rolling Stone cover? That was something magical. At this point, Beatles fans had spent the better part of the decade hoping for a reunion. While the band never officially got back together, Rolling Stone tapped into that collective nostalgia with this cover. It was a reminder of what once was and what might have been. Each member was living their own life. John in New York, Paul topping the charts, George exploring spirituality, and Ringo doing his own thing. But the cover made fans dream. Playboy, Dolly Parton, October 1971. You can't talk about wild 70s magazine covers without mentioning Playboy. They had so many famous covers, but Dolly Parton's October 1971 issue was next level. First of all, it was Dolly. Second, she was in a black bunny outfit, big hair, big smile, and all the charm in the world. Playboy had done the whole celebrity posing thing before, but Dolly's cover was different. It was fun, flirty, and pure 70s. Mad Magazine. Nixon as Alfred E. Newman, 1974. If you were a kid or teenager in the 70s, you had at least one issue of Mad lying around. One of the best covers from the decade? 1974. Richard Nixon with Alfred E. Newman's signature gap-toothed grin. If you wanted to know how people felt about politics back then, just look at Mad. They didn't just make fun of Nixon, they eviscerated him. Every scandal, every blunder, nothing was safe. And when Watergate hit, MAD had a field day. TV Guide may have been small, but its covers packed a punch. Case in point, Farrah Fawcett, September 1976. This was the year Charlie's Angels premiered, launching Farrah into superstardom. Alongside her co-stars Kate Jackson and Jaclyn Smith, Farrah's feathered hair and dazzling smile quickly became an icon of the decade. If you had this issue sitting on your parents' coffee table, chances are you flipped through it more times than you needed to. just to admire the future queen of primetime television. Esquire, Super Sports, October 1974. Back in the 1970s, Esquire wasn't just a magazine, it was a cultural institution. It captured the spirit of the times with a sharp wit, a knowing eye, and a knack for blending highbrow journalism with pop culture. And when Esquire went all in on a subject, you knew you were getting something special. That's exactly what happened in October 1974 with the Super Sports issue, a sprawling 400-plus page love letter to the athletes and games that defined the decade. This wasn't just a rundown of box scores or a collection of puff pieces. Esquire did what it did best, telling stories that mattered, peeling back the layers of sports to reveal something deeper. There was Visions of 8, a stunning pictorial essay where artists reimagined American superathletes, offering a perspective you wouldn't find in Sports Illustrated. Take a quick pause and click on this awesome button called subscribe so we can stay connected. It will also encourage me to share many more 70s treasures like the one you're watching right now. Thanks. Popular Mechanics. Various. Before the internet, before YouTube tutorials, Popular Mechanics was my gateway to the future. If you wanted to build something, fix something, or just understand the latest technology, this magazine had you covered. Every issue felt like a treasure trove of possibilities. Blueprints for homemade gadgets, deep dives into cutting-edge science, and glimpses of the world that was just around the corner. They weren't just dreaming up wild sci-fi concepts, they were showing real advancements in solar energy, home automation, and personal computing, things that seemed almost unbelievable at the time. Whether it was a guide to tuning up your car, an article on the next big breakthrough, or a bold prediction about the homes of tomorrow, Popular Mechanics made the future feel within reach. For the tinkerers, the inventors, and the dreamers of the 1970s, this wasn't just a magazine. It was an instruction manual for what was coming next, and I couldn't wait to turn the page. People Magazine, first issue, March 4th, 1974. You ever wonder where People Magazine got its start? The very first issue dropped in March 1974 with Mia Farrow on the cover. This was back when magazines really meant something in Hollywood. You didn't have Instagram to show you what celebrities were eating for lunch. You had People, and if you made it on the cover, you were big time. Creem Magazine, Various. If you were into rock and roll, Creem was your go-to. They didn't cater to the polished mainstream image of rock stars. Instead, they championed the raw, rebellious side of music. By the late 70s, punk had crashed onto the scene and Creem was all over it, covering bands like the Sex Pistols, the Ramones, and the Clash. Their articles captured the chaos and energy of the movement, even if they didn't dedicate a cover solely to a punk explosion in 1977. Still, their coverage of punk was loud, unfiltered, and every bit as cool as the scene itself. Time Magazine, Is God Dead? April 8, 1966. Okay, I know this one's a bit of a cheat, it's from '66, but hear me out. Time's Is God Dead? Cover lingered into the 70s like an old rumor. That stark blood-red background with bold black letters? It was like, boom, a theological mic drop. This wasn't some religious pamphlet. It was Time, one of the biggest news magazines in the world. Even in the 70s, this cover still came up in debates, late-night TV monologues, and heated conversations at the dinner table. Omni Magazine, futuristic cover, October 1978. And finally, let's talk about something way ahead of its time. Omni Magazine. If you were a sci-fi nerd in the 70s, you probably had a stash of these somewhere. The October 1978 cover, featuring a sleek, futuristic design, was unlike anything else on newsstands. It made space, AI, and future tech look cool before those things were even part of everyday conversation. Looking back, magazine covers weren't just about selling copies. They captured moments in time. They defined eras, started conversations, and sometimes sparked outrage. You didn't just read a magazine, you held a piece of pop culture history in your hands. And that's what made the 70s so special. You couldn't scroll through your phone or check a website. You had to go to the newsstand, pick up a fresh issue, and see what the world was talking about. And if you were lucky, you found a cover that blew your mind. So tell me, what's the one magazine or magazine cover from the 70s that you remember most? Drop it in the comments and let's talk nostalgia.